exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Wow, that was random. Exceptional radio.
Hey, it's the 4th of April. And
the 5th, right?
The 5th of April, that's right. And we are, 4 weeks into quarantine. And they've expanded it down now to the end of the month. We're going to go into May, looks like. And I think this was to be expected. I think that there was no way that this wasn't going to happen. In fact, I think that the entire intent of just doling it out once a month is to prevent people from freaking out. And
Yeah, I mean, I think Americans are not good at not freaking out, so in attempting to downplay it to prevent that, it has emphasized the danger and threat to prevent Americans from freaking out.
yeah.
So this is like a double-edged sword of lack of critical thinking and predisposition to overreact. It's a bad perfect storm.
Perfect storm.
At the same time, Americans are also extremely docile. So on the one hand, you have a country that's overcharged and has a shitload of guns. But on the other hand, everybody's all loaded up on McDonald's and fucking sodium, and they're too fucking fat to actually do anything about it. Everybody leaving their house. Everybody wants the cops and the tanks to come to their door so they don't have to move.
They'll knock with an artillery round, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's what Americans want, because they don't want to actually have to leave the house. Like, how many steps is this going to involve? I already got my 1,000 steps in for the day. I only need 1,000 steps for one,
This is terrible.
I thought it was 10,000 steps.
That's for an actual healthy person. I'm talking about for Americans.
That's too
only
rich.
get like 1,000 steps in. They go to the mailbox and to the cars to go to McDonald's.
It's actually interesting, Chris. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I was in Serbia several years ago, and I was listening to the radio, and I guess the obesity pandemic is, kind of reaching worldwide these days. And they were talking about people being more fat and less healthy. So they were like, look, what you can do to combat this is, like, instead of always taking the elevator or the escalator, try taking the stairs every now and again instead. Try to, every chance that you get, take more steps. And they gave a couple of tips as to, like, when people were using motorized transportation instead of walking.
Years
I found it
ago,
to be a pretty good advice.
Years ago, when I was getting my associate's degrees, I found myself climbing up and down staircases a lot. And it occurred to me that, and it wasn't as easy as I remembered it being when I was in high school or younger. And it occurred to me that when I was in high school or in elementary school, I was like a foot shorter. And so to keep up with the crowd, I had to like skip steps going upstairs. And as a result, I had developed really strong leg and lower back muscles to carry a backpack and all that stuff. But at some point, I became sedentary and I sat my ass down. And those muscles stopped working together properly. And so, for the 2 years or so that I was pursuing an associate's degree, I decided I was going to double the steps, skip one every time. And it worked until I stopped climbing staircases again. And that's
It's got to be consistent with it.
Yeah, you can't just stop once you get there. You got to keep going.
No, it's definitely a process, man. Like, it was crazy for me just growing up, like, from the ages 15 to 25, I weighed 150 pounds the whole time. Whether I worked out, ate, didn't eat, whatever I did, I weighed 150 pounds. When I got my first internship at 25, it's a little different story why it took me so long to get an internship, but I started sitting down for 40 hours a week in front of a screen for work or whatever. And I immediately gained 10 pounds. You know what I mean? And I was just like, wow, okay, I get it. This is how this works. You know, you got to stay active.
Yeah, that's one of those things that they just don't beat into your head hard enough when you're young.
Yep.
No, it's definitely a process, man. You gotta keep going. I've just recently been thinking about it. Like, realistically speaking, I've been working out 3 to 6 times a week for the past 20 years. And you know, I'm looking at my peers and I'm like, okay, now it's starting to show. You know what I mean? And as long as I feel like I can keep this up, you know, I'm not afraid of my 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever age I get to. I feel as long as I'm staying active and, you know, I don't have some sort of genetic ticking time bomb, like I'm gonna keep it up.
Yeah. Well, there have been studies conducted in France that track, and these are longitudinal studies, like decades-long studies, where they track the caloric intake of the subjects. And what they found was over time, people reach this kind of stasis with their bodies where they start to require fewer and fewer calories. And this is kind of like, you know, if you're observant of your lifestyle and the kind of foods you eat, it's not a hard transition to make. But in a lot of you know, Western culture, it's, you know, opulence is a sign of wealth, and it's really difficult to extricate that from being a successful person when the goal is really to, you know, attain longevity and health.
Right.
Opulence and health are, you know, odd
Man,
bedfellows.
I feel like the Mongols had that figured out, man, with you know, the nomadic lifestyle. And you're soft if you're sedentary. Oh, you live in a settlement? No. You know, if we all stayed moving around and our house was literally where we slept every night,
you know,
it'd
part
probably
of
be a
the
slightly
Japanese
different.
culture of using futons is the belief that sleeping on like a soft bed makes you soft. And I think there's some truth to that, because I have a memory foam mattress that when I got it was really good. But as my back started to heal, it's starting to reveal places where I have deficiencies in musculature or in synergy. And so when I, you know, fall asleep and relax, everything can go haywire if I just sleep wrong. It sucks to realize, hey, if I sleep wrong or get out of bed wrong, I could throw my back out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's some shit you have to start realizing when you get over
30.
30. Yeah.
Yeah, buddy. It's that magic number.
Yep. But, you know, this gets back to kids just not understanding their own mortality and doing shit that they probably hurt themselves, but because they just overlook their own pain and don't know what something serious feels like until it's actually broken.
Yeah.
You know, how many times were you dehydrated as a kid and just didn't care because you didn't really know what dehydration felt like?
Yep.
Or know what the long-term impacts were and just kept drinking some soda.
Man, that just reminds me of this incident that I had. I was like 35. My friend was like 30. It was a hot summer day. I went to his house. We were eating vodka melon. He's like, hey, you want to go play soccer? I was like, soccer? Bro, we're eating vodka melon. It's hot as hell outside. I'm not going to go die out on that field with you. No, thank you. And he thought that he could do that, not realizing that he's not 18 or 25 no more. They went out there and had a torturous time at it. I mean, your body is what it is, right? You can't really argue physics. But Chris, I wanted to ask you. So my understanding was actually until we actually hit about age 25, it's obviously different for different individuals, but the part of our brain that's actually responsible for looking into the future and understanding consequences and how they're going to unfold in the future really only develops at the very, very end of our brain development, which is why we have juvenile laws and we try people as minors, because they literally don't understand the consequences of their actions.
Right.
So that because I got that, like, I read a headline or an article or somebody said it to me many, many years ago, and I guess I sort of took it as fact, but I wanted to run it past you guys.
No, I mean, everybody's brain develops differently, obviously, but what you're saying is not inaccurate. Um, and it's obviously going to vary depending on culture, especially the less empathetic a culture is going to be, the more difficult it's going to be for someone to abstract their thought outside of themselves. So shit like that, where it might be because of being in a Western individualist culture that people are less able to abstract outside of themselves more than anything. In general, over here, because it's not gonna be true the same everywhere, which is also gonna be why in some cases where you have kids who are doing better at math earlier in certain societies, then they're going to not have the same sort of uh, trajectory of abstraction development either. So I think there's a predisposition for the Western science mind to want to have a singular development path. Um, but this is also where, obviously a child prodigy is going to be somebody who gets that shit before the timeline says they're supposed to. So like, there's all these things about it that it's not impossible for somebody to be able to grasp it without having that part of their brain developed. So there's all these things about it that um
You can use to actually affect the way that your cognitive process works, even though that part of your brain isn't developed, just using mental
right,
fortitude or mental discipline and different
agility or
mm,
uh
right.
ability, lateral thought.
Mm.
um there's a lot of forward trajectory thought in the West that makes it very difficult to see if there's always more than one path to something. I don't care what
Mm.
it is, but
Mm-hmm.
Western thought makes that very difficult to see the other paths because it's always one that's right.
Do you think that religion has a role in that cultural development?
Oh,
The one.
1,000%. And a lot of that has to do with the uh, brother's keeper, but simultaneous dominion over earth in the Christian, Judeo-Christian sphere, and on the other hand, a more altruistic,
Hey,
less
we've got a call in.
individual.
It's
Oh, nice.
Mr. Guinness Oathout has called into the show.
Nice.
Oh, it's good to be on the show today, guys. How's
Welcome.
everybody doing?
We are doing fantastic. How are you doing in isolation?
I am not in isolation right now.
I do
I've
not hear
decided
him
to
at
leave
all, T.
Can't hear
isolation
him.
and go help some old people. Yeah, so
He
I've got
should
a
be
couple
calling
old
into the
people that
Zoom
don't have
number.
cars, and I'm
Hey,
taking them
let
to
me
the
send you the
grocery
Zoom
store
number. Let me send you the Zoom number so you can get on this group call.
Yeah.
today. Okay, sure. Yeah, hit me up.
Okay.
Can you shoot that over? Can I shoot that over to somebody else as well? I had a buddy that was interested in calling in. I don't know if he will or not, but I at least want to give him the opportunity.
Where is it?
Because I have the invite in my Gmail. Can I just forward that?
I would rather we try and roll this out slower, but
All right, no, that's
what do you
fine.
want to talk about?
Let's roll it out slower. We can talk about it offline. It's fine. Next time.
Yeah, there's a meeting. The meeting ID and the numeric password is there.
Yeah, I just clicked the link on my phone.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to get in. You just gotta find how to find people.
You used to have like that rainbow colored screen. Oh wait, no, there's no visuals. You remember on the TV when they'd have technical difficulties?
Yeah. Or they have the in the mocking stuff. It's like the dude with the Native American headdress, and then it's like a black and white screen. There's a couple variations on that, technical difficulties. But
Yep.
yeah, man, I do think that ultimately a religion has a lot of influence on how
thought process developed.
Yeah, because as I was saying, like there's a lot more individualism in the Western Judeo-Christian frameworks, which is even like the atheists still have that same individualist predisposition, even though they don't want to. Like, if you're an atheist in the West, your thought process is still built around a Judeo-Christian framework, whether you want to admit it or not, because all of our value systems in the West are built around Judeo-Christian frameworks, whether you like it or not.
Yep.
So I think there's if people like if atheists don't acknowledge that, then I feel like they are kind of lying to themselves, and it makes it a lot more difficult to be a true atheist if you can't acknowledge like that atheism itself is really only in contradiction to a Judeo-Christian God, because a lot of like other descriptions of the universe from different religious frameworks don't have the same Judeo-Christian viewpoints, and a lot of them are in line with what atheists believe about the universe. So a living, aware, jealous universe is a very Judeo-Christian concept, and only in a universe where you're allowed to believe that God.
Ah, he's joined us.
Yeah,
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. Look at this.
Oh,
What the? Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you can't see this because this is a talk show, obviously. On our Zoom screen, I'm looking at a friend of mine that I've known for 2 decades, and has had, he's one of my 2 friends who have glorious dreadlocks, and now I have 1 friend who has glorious dreadlocks. And this is, I don't think I've seen the shape of your head like this in like a decade almost.
I don't think anybody has ever. I don't think I've had my hair cut this short since I was a little child.
No, but
wow.
I've seen your hair pretty short, but holy crap, never a fade.
Yeah, well, I tried to cut it myself, and that was an awful mistake.
You know, there's this thing going around the internet right now. It says, "Ladies, don't do your own bangs," and I think that the corollary is, guys, don't do your own fade.
I had somebody else do that.
Oh,
I went training to be a barber, and I've got a buddy who's training to be a barber. He had, I don't know, a couple of months of school in before this all happened, and then, of course, school canceled.
yeah.
He's never given a haircut to an adult, so I was his first. I said, fuck it.
It doesn't look bad. It looks good.
It doesn't look good. It's all over the place. It's whatever. It is what it is. A change. My head's really light. Holy shit.
You
Chris,
can feel the air now, right?
Oh, man. I can feel the air. I can feel my pillow. There are lots of things that I haven't been acquainted to in a long time. But, it's a huge change. It's a huge change. I'm not 100% happy with it yet, but I figured now's the best time. If I'm not bartending, then I'm going to go ahead and cut it now and hope for the best.
Yeah.
2 months, 3 months, 6 months when I get back to work, if I get back to work.
Do we even know when it's going to be?
I'm not expecting ever to make any money at bartending again.
Oof. Well, they expect peak resource utilization nationwide in about 10, 11 days or so. And in Indiana, it's still about 2 weeks away. And I'm pretty sure they've reached peak resource utilization in a few of the big major metros.
I feel like bars will be one of the things that do survive, just because the crowd is like a risk-taking crowd in the first place. So I don't think that they're necessarily going to avert their behavior after this is all over.
Imagine
Like,
bars putting up plexiglass like pharmacies.
Right. Yeah, that'd be crazy.
These people are filthy. I see how they behave in just everyday life. And,
People fucking bar bathrooms, man.
people do everything in bar bathrooms.
That, like, I get what they were trying to do by like, oh, fuck in the bathroom. That's the grossest shit. Like, and now we can all acknowledge that that's super gross and nobody should be doing that shit. And it's like,
A little too late.
yeah, a little too late. But it's like, hey, in 2021, no more fucking in bar bathrooms, people.
Man,
Like,
it was going around the internet. It says if you've got 20 seconds to do coke in our bathroom, you've got 20 seconds to wash your fucking hands. You got a Ruby Rod haircut going on today.
Oh man,
Chris, you look like Ruby Rod.
I have no idea who that is.
It's a character from Fifth Element. It's the Chris Tucker character.
Got that big, I'd say it's a, oh shit, what do they call those?
It's like a pompadour.
Pompadour.
But it's like a
donut pompadour.
Afro pompadour.
Dreadlock Afro pompadour. No, I'm taking some old people to the grocery store today, trying to help them out. They don't have cars. I don't want Ron on the bus. You know.
That's good, man.
They're just old as shit. They're inside doing their thing. I'm like, I'll just sit in the car and wait. I got my gloves and my little mask and whatnot, which are absolutely unobtainable.
Yeah, I tried to get some latex gloves. It wasn't happening.
Man, I called all around and tried to find some. I found some at Harbor Freight, and they were just latex mechanics gloves. But they had about 4 boxes left. That was it. I'm like,
everything's running out.
yeah, well, you know, what are you gonna do? Stay home and quit fucking about.
Yeah.
It's a socialism.
Man, oh shit. So I don't want no health. I don't need to be taken care of when I'm old, sick. I'll just die like Trump wants everybody to do.
Well,
I heard he asked a lot of old, dying, sick people for their vote before. Is that true?
Probably did. Can I get a mail-in vote before y'all?
So we're about to run into the 40-minute time limit of Zoom. We're going to take a little break, and we will be right back. back, and we are moving and grooving. So I think what you were saying before we had to take a little break was actually pretty interesting. The idea that the bar would actually survive. It occurred to me that another reason the bar might survive is simply because they maintain this gigantic cache of alcohol, of a variety of alcohol. And that's not really something that a lot of people are going to be able to maintain on their own.
Oh yeah.
There's an economy of scale that really enables the dispensary, the alcohol dispensary, to remain vital, and that it's just part of a culture. And either the culture is going to go away completely and the bar just won't survive, or like you said, this is already a risk-taking group, and I think alcoholism and alcohol consumption and socialization, these are all things that we're going to have to really address these things as we all move forward, especially if something like, global pandemic the intervals for these epidemics has been shorter and shorter. If we look back, I mean, SARS-1 was in 2003, and then the MERS was 2011, 2012, 13, whatever. So, and we've also had other outbreaks of some really serious stuff. And until our global health infrastructure is able to respond quickly enough, like everywhere, we're just not going to be able to contain things when they pop up. Especially unless, travel, of course, is going to change. And that'll probably change a lot of, just like the 9/11 analogy, how everything changed really dramatically after 9/11. We know that things are going to change now.
Yeah.
Our Surgeon General declared this in 9/11 moment.
I don't know if they will, because let's call it what it is. Like, a lot of the reason that Africa got the virus later is because white people weren't really traveling there.
That's true.
So like I'm not, and again, I'm not saying white people are the ones that carried the disease, but it's because there was not a heavy fucking tourism. Right. Well, because there wasn't a heavy tourism culture in Africa, Africa just was not hit as hard as the other tourist heavy cultures, like Italy, for example.
Oh no, that's
Italy's
definitely
like
true.
100% tourist culture, and everybody's always going there during the summer. Oh, I want to go to the beaches or whatever, and it's like fucking. That's the place that gets hit the hardest because everybody's trying to go there. And after all this is over, we got to ask ourselves: is tourism culture destroying? Like, is that something that we need to perpetuate in the same way? Because there's exploitation, there's lots of risk with it, and then it's only a certain population that's really able to take advantage. So it's like a small percentage of people fucking up the planet and getting a bunch of other people at risk because they want to go on a fucking vacation every year or a couple times a year. Well, I don't get to go on vacations like these.
I think that the cruise industry has gotten hit real hard. Like, the cruise ships basically become death ships.
Mm-hmm.
It's a plague ship. And even what's his name? The guy in Florida, the governor of Florida, is like, no, we don't want you to park your boat here. And then finally, they have to let him park the boat. and it creates such hysteria that some idiot, derails a train, and it still ends up like 800 feet shy of ramming the boat. I mean, in the history of naval catastrophe, I don't think sinking by train has ever been the thing. At least not in modern, since ships have been made out of steel.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, seriously. Who hijacks a train to try and take out a boat?
Somebody creative.
I guess. I mean, how much plastique would you need to blow? This is obviously a rhetorical question because I don't think anybody I know knows how to use plastic explosives. But how much would you actually need to blow up a steel girdered, like stone or limestone encased train bridge so that you could take out a boat? And then the timing that you'd have to put into it. Like, right. I mean, we're talking like,
those are some major physics equations.
This is like right? The most hardcore Rube Goldberg equation right now. And I've seen some pretty serious and impressive Rube Goldberg machines come out of like Purdue, but blowing up a giant bridge that's engineered to withstand, hundreds, if not thousands of passes of hundreds of tons worth of steel, trains all the time. That thing's not coming down easily.
No. Well, and then, like you're saying, if you also have to calculate when the train's going to hit the boat, you have to be able to understand how fast something falls and the proper timing with its trajectory, if it's moving at a certain speed, so then it's not going to fall straight down. There's all these things about it.
Oh,
where,
yeah.
Like, it's not as, whenever you have these daredevils jumping over ramps, there's so much math involved in their calculations, but it seems like they just rev up their car and jump it, but you don't see the fucking chalkboards with all their equations.
I imagine at this
That's not
point
the
they're
fun
using really complex physical
Well, yeah, they're
modeling.
not using, they're not obviously not using. Well,
They might be using dry erase boards.
I was gonna say I wouldn't doubt somebody uses a dry erase board just because it's really easy. Like there's some things that just
it's just faster.
You can't reinvent the fucking wheel like in certain contexts where it's like
at the highest levels of math, you don't actually really use numbers. You're using formulas and symbols that mean something else. And so at that point, I think it's actually faster once to conceptualize the equation that way, and then you can plug it into the machine that does the modeling, and then it does all the math really fast for you.
Yeah.
But at this point, I think it's really amusing and cute to think that like somebody could just steal a train and take out a boat.
I don't know. Does anybody actually do that Daredevil shit anymore? Because it's like there's no.
There was that guy, that flat earther, who built a rocket so he could fly up to see the curvature or the flatness of the Earth, but he only got like 2,000 feet in the air.
He did.
He died. Yeah.
He tried
on
it.
His second attempt.
Yeah. But didn't he just explode though? Like, didn't the thing just like?
No, they didn't give him the details because they were recording it for a quote unquote science channel. So all of the video is under
locked
lock
under
and
NDA.
key,
Yeah.
And the actual like details have not really been disclosed because effectively that dude's dead because the science channel prodded him on. If he hadn't have been made famous for doing some stupid ass shit, that dude would probably still be well. Now he probably would have killed himself doing something stupid anyway, but we wouldn't know about it.
I shouldn't laugh about that. That sucks.
I mean, fuck it, dude. He's gonna kill himself doing something stupid.
I mean, that like he
was didn't believe the Earth was round.
The dude.
He's using physical laws to build rockets based on the Earth being round, and he wants to prove that it's flat.
But I guess that's the funny thing is that he could have spent less money on a plane ticket and flown it to like 40,000 feet, cruising altitude, and seen the curvature of the Earth with his eyes.
Yeah, I can't pretend I care that dude's dead. I really can't. That's like I'm not that good of an actor.
Yeah. Well, he went beyond Darwin Award.
Yeah. Which again,
that's just
that type of person we have to coexist with, where that person makes our lives more difficult.
Yeah.
That person makes all of our lives more difficult by existing, because then they believe their quote-unquote liberty gives them the freedom to impose their will on us.
Their liberty and freedom is complicating and congesting the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, actions that solely affect yourself are way different than actions that you take that you think are only affecting you, but really have ripple effects throughout society.
Yeah,
Not just like your immediate family, but
that person who wrecks their crotch rocket and splats on a tree and their bike goes flying into the woods, that requires a cleanup crew to go in and extract like the components and wreckage of that motorcycle.
Yep, and they're gonna do it. But that's like Neil Brennan made the very astute and valid point of like, oh, the government's gonna help us all with COVID-19, but if you get cancer, fuck it, you're on your own. Like,
yep.
The fact that the government is nationalizing car production lines to get ventilators out, but millions of people die of cancer all the time, and they're not doing shit to like actually help. It's I don't know. It's like And then on top of that, the people who are dying at a disproportionate rate are yet again the same groups that um, always suffer the ills of this system. I'm like, on the
So
one hand, I understand why people don't believe the government and then try to blame 5G, which is ridiculous. But then on the other hand, it's like, then you have the government planning these misinformation campaigns, and then you got people thinking 5G cell phone towers are causing this fucking virus. Who have no idea how fucking cell phone signals work.
oh,
These
so
people are now suddenly frequency experts too.
I've glimpsed even deeper into the pathology of the 5G theory, and so there's a component to this that the government is going to issue a cure or a treatment, an inoculation of some kind, and it somehow manages to tie Bill Gates, who thinks I'm serious, Bill
The
Gates,
RFID thing. Yeah,
yeah,
I've read about
with the
this because he owns
RFID chips.
50% of the WHO.
Sure. And so they think that the chip is activated by the 5G wavelength,
Towers.
and that's how they, I don't know, track us, initiate mind control, activate sleepers, whatever fits the narrative of that, the following variations.
Posted to Facebook from a cell phone that tracks every single move.
Exactly. I mean, we willingly filled out profiles. Everyone willingly filled out profiles because they wanted to be part of the social networking revolution. And then in the end, they're afraid that we're going to get an implant when we willingly carry it with us everywhere. Not just everywhere, but to the bathroom, to the trash.
But it's not in your skin. It's not in your skin.
I mean, when I'm wearing earbuds, that stuff's inside me. It's sitting inside my ears. It's just not permanently installed, implanted.
Yeah, it's I don't know, man. Delusion and self-awareness are like close cousins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. One of my friends was talking about the Kung Flu and the emergence of the dumb flu, and how the dumb flu has always been around, but now dumb flu and Kung Flu can travel together, and they're like, they're banding together, and now it's like even worse.
Yeah, I don't know, because that shit's always been around, but it's like, it's so hard to know how to go about it, in the sense of a lot of the quote unquote dumb foo is the grandparent of somebody who believes himself to be liberal, who they're too afraid to talk back to their grandparent on Thanksgiving when they got the chance to call them out on their bullshit. So they sit there and listen to their fucking grandparent rant and rave on their bullshit and don't call them on that. And then they come chastise us for not voting for their fucking Democratic candidate of choice, because we're the easy people to antagonize, because then it's like, oh, I'm gonna actually use my antagonizing energy to go after people who are on the left, to make them be more on my side, instead of actually confronting my racist ass grandfather with that energy. We shouldn't be fighting on the left about anything, but all people want to do is chastise each other for not being left wing enough, or not being whatever Biden Democrat enough, when really all the energy should be focused on some racist ass grandpa who's still fucking alive, still voting, still out here not social distancing, because 5G is the fucking source of this, and Fox News has really got the truth, and the whole coronavirus is just a scam because we're trying to fuck up the election. We're making this all up. And those people should really be the ones that the fucking left is going after, instead of fucking trying to tell us how we need to vote in November.
Yeah, I get this feeling that those voices aren't heard by people on the left because, there's this concentrated effort by the Tea Party to create a space that was so antagonistic that nobody wanted to be involved in it except for the people that really wanted to participate in that kind of behavior. And then it started to create, mirrors on the left. You have this extra radicalized left that's willing to, stand up and yell back, and they're perceived as the same thing, but really it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
It's when people.
Well,
I think
it
when
kinda
people have
is in
accepted
that-
bullies as part of the culture for so long, they can't tell who's the bully when both people are yelling.
And well, it's the same thing in that both people are yelling, and when the people do it on the left, they're not doing it out of any sort of individualist perspective. They're only yelling the things that the left is telling them to yell about. Like, remember when we had the Dakota Access Pipeline? And
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
was fucking rah rah no dapple, and then once they thought they won that shit, it's moving on to the next thing.
The thing
And
about
then
that
it's
is
like,
there are so many thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of pipeline all over the country, water, gas, oil, you name it, chemicals that we don't really think about are being passed underneath us all the time.
but it's because
And when we
the
look
left
at the
is,
maps,
sheepishly made to focus on individual things as
Yeah.
if they can win this individual
no, it's not a
this one
piecemeal
fight.
thing.
Yeah. And
Can't
that's why
piecemeal
people can't
equality.
imagine it.
That's, several years ago, I was trying to explain to a buddy of mine that it was important that we address all of these things at the same time. He said, "Well, how do you figure out where to start?" It's like you have to start in the middle, and you work your way around until you figure things out. And as things start to unbalance, we've got to check those. And eventually, the thought exercise takes to this overwhelming place where so much is happening that people become numb.
Did you guys see the 2 French doctors that want to test COVID vaccines in Africa?
Of course they want to test it in Africa.
Well, Trump's trying to.
They made some super sketchy statements about how they, like, back in the day, they used to pick prostitutes to study AIDS and different treatments for AIDS because they were the perfect group because they were just out there, at the most risk. And it's like, hold on, I thought in Africa this stuff was spreading a whole lot slower, and it didn't hit as hard. Man, those egalitarian French, man, only by reputation.
Yeah, that's I don't know. Our Cheeto
They were
Mussolini's.
basically saying, let's test it on the Africans because they're worthless. Literally.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a whole bunch of soccer stars from Africa kick up a shitstorm about it. Like, hold on, man, what are you guys really talking about?
It's like, okay, prepare to suck at soccer for the next year, guys. Sorry. Prepare to have all the soccer money go somewhere else this year because y'all made a shitstorm statement. No, our own Cheeto Mussolini is pushing some, treatment that's not quite done being tested, and made it seem like, oh, this will work. We're gonna push this through. I might take it twice. It's like, what the fuck? If it works, you don't need to take it twice.
But he's not speaking to people that understand what he's talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well.
If you do it once, do it twice. Twice is nice. You know what I mean?
But that's not how it works.
If you do it twice, you'll be twice as immune.
Yeah. Yeah, my immunity index is like 2 times. It's going to be 3 times in November. I'm like, what the? Okay, so I was reading about pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic. Well, they don't really know what it is because they can't really do full antibody tests. But they're getting closer. Like Stanford is releasing. They've been prioritizing antibody tests, and they've successfully tested like 40,000 people with it apparently, and so they're getting good results. And so there was another test done in Europe, and they found that roughly 17.9 is the number. So roughly 18% of people who tested positive but were asymptomatic, but they couldn't determine which ones were also pre-symptomatic because some people still had time to develop later. And so even if let's just say the 18% is just asymptomatic carriers or people with the SARS-2, they don't develop SARS-2. They just have coronavirus and they develop the antibodies. People really seem to think that they're going to be part of that 18% corona lottery, where somehow they're able to traverse the wilderness safely, 18% of people who get it is still a really, really small number.
Man, people think, everybody's the champion until you step in that ring, man.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And people having some sort of superstar athlete mentalities about things that have absolutely nothing to do with your personal control.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. I want to feel safe and secure and confident and all of that. I don't want to be an idiot, and I don't want to die in an avoidable manner. Let me say it like that.
Yep. Well, it's just like, somebody made the comparison of like, there's this element of if the angel of death came and people were told to paint a sign on your door and the angel will skip over your house, motherfuckers would be like, I ain't painting no goddamn sign on my door. I ain't cutting no goat's blood to paint the door. Fuck the angel of death. And then when their firstborn gets killed, you're like, why didn't God tell me I could do anything to stop my kid from getting born? And it's like the same shit, man.
Yeah.
That's wild, man.
You can't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard.
It's ain't coming to me.
It's hard. It's hard not to have a callous attitude towards it because you have so many chances to do something about it, and then you don't, and then you don't, and then you feel sorry for yourself. And I don't even know how to take those people because I'm an empathic person. I want to feel. I try to understand people's troubles and where they stand, but it's I don't even know.
Yeah. What can you do? What can you do? I think the only thing that we can do is just keep on track. There's a clear path to staying safe through all of this. There's a very simple thing that we can do is just stay indoors. I think that we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that it's reasonable that we can, get through all of this stuff without having to put up with the dumbasses. They'll filter themselves out for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they call them the Darwin Awards.
Yeah. Well, it's just like there's people still out, drinking and driving and getting in accidents when there's nobody on the fucking road. Like, those are the only people end up getting the quarantine tickets because they fucking end up in a traffic incident on their own.
Yeah, man. My friend was telling me because he cuts lawns, and I guess they're still allowed to do that or whatever, that he was smashing on the highways yesterday, 80, 90, 100. He was passing cops. Nobody was pulling anybody over. And it's basically you got to be out there like attacking somebody. There's got to be some physical violence going on for them to even want to begin to approach you.
That's exactly right. It's the way it should be.
Yeah. There you
Finally.
Stay
Cops
away from me. I will breathe on you.
Yeah, stay the fuck up out my business.
So, locally, I think it was yesterday. We have one secondary north-south corridor that gets heavy use, and it's called Rogers Street. And yesterday, it was backed up for like 2 miles, like 1 mile southbound from the food bank and the CSA, community supported agriculture pickups location, and then like up the other direction, probably I can't even remember. But I was watching this video of a person walking up and down the street, and they were just stunned because Rogers is never gridlocked. And I think that there's, even with the best intentions to support community agriculture and to participate in a local economy, it still shows the infrastructural limitations and in a lot of ways the logistical limitations of organizing these things like this, they're trying to, in a lot of ways, it seemed like they were just trying to maintain the existing paradigm of go and do this, but everyone showing up at the same time just doesn't work. That's the I know McDonald's makes billions of burgers a day, but they freak out when I order 500,000 all at once situation. And so, I don't know. There's a way to do this. It just takes some planning.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. So I'm working on a project right now, and it's a giant manufacturing company, and when people try to order from them, they have an e-commerce website, and when people try to order from them now, if you put in, they have what's called an exceptional demand threshold. So you can order 1 million units. They'll let your order go through, but you have to go call their customer service to figure out how delivery is going to work. They won't give you a delivery schedule. They won't promise any dates. They won't do anything. But they'll just sell it to you. Like, yeah, we'll sell it to you. We'll talk to you when you can get it, though.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's the thing. Like, for a while, I remember reading about this trend of private labeling and selling, 20 people on Amazon selling the same yoga mat. Just they put a different brand, they stamp a different brand on it somewhere. And this was a big thing. There's a huge Amazon fitness industry associated with personal trainers who just wanted to have their own brand of accessories, fitness accessories, health accessories. But once the market was saturated and Amazon realized which version of the mattress was selling the best, of the yoga mat was selling the best, they went and bought the entire supply chain in China. They just soaked it all up and gave them a deal they couldn't refuse, so that their competitors, the people who were selling originally as private labels, they were basically priced out of their own market, the one that they created. And this has extended through all of those Amazon basics, electronics. Supply chain control is a really interesting concept that I don't think people consider very often.
No, they definitely don't.
I mean,
because America hasn't been judicious about how they spend their dollars, which is how everything got outsourced.
Yeah. That's how we end up with a toilet paper shortage while our toilet paper manufacturers are running at full steam.
Yep. That's exactly right.
I mean, maximum toilet paper output is not enough to counter just insurmountable fear and panic. Which means that they weren't making enough toilet paper to begin with. But they were making too much.
That really silly video about the coronavirus in Russia that I shared with you the other day. The guy says at the very end of the video very clearly, the best friend of pandemics is panic. So
yeah.
Well, he says pandemia, but that's a pandemic.
Can you spell? You can't spell pandemic without panic. I mean,
well, it's got all the same letters on it. P-A-N-I-C.
I know, they just throw the dem in the middle of it, right?
Funny how language gets it right sometimes, huh?
Yeah. Dem panic, pandemic.
Yeah, that's the last thing you want to do in a situation like this is lose your sense of bearing.
Well, I think that's part of the grieving process is people have to figure out how to get to that point where they can accept it and make those behavioral changes that will give them a better chance at survival.
Yeah. I mean, it's not rocket science.
No.
We're being given fairly simple instructions.
I mean, it's pretty clear now. Once they put you on a ventilator, it's not a good sign.
Yeah.
It's a bad sign. It's a really bad sign once they put you on a ventilator. And I think the Japanese figured out that it's the COPD machines that are spreading the aerosolizing the virus in nursing homes.
That's great news right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they start talking about medically induced comas as a solution, I'm just like, man, this doesn't sound like a great treatment. I guess it's better than death, but I'm not sure.
Medically induced coma, just terrifying. That's
And at the same time, if the economy can't survive this for like a year, then this economy wasn't
robust enough to,
sustainable.
anyways.
It wasn't sustainable.
Yeah.
Like
I just don't understand how an economy can die, right? Like it's not going away.
No,
People are going to continue
The
trading.
economy is not an organism. It's a construct of interaction.
It kind of is an organism, though, and that's where this organism is on the verge of death. Another organism will emerge.
Yeah,
but
I would say evolution, but death is it's a transitional period. You got to die to be reborn.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you can't.
But
like,
in that
the
case,
same
it's like
economy,
that's
like,
the mythical
same economy-
phoenix.
No, I'm saying the same economy that existed in like the 1400s is not the economy that we have now. It's not the
That's
same
true.
body at all.
Yeah.
Like not even remotely close. And
I mean-
there's been many things that would, like, you could say the War of 1812 is like a point where that economy died, and then the Civil War is another point where that next economy died. So I guess it depends on where you want to mark, like, if it's like connection to the British Empire or how much it's globalized, like,
Right.
all these things about it where you could say, well, it definitively died here.
I guess I just think of it more of a continuum of interaction and less of trying to give it historical backing. It breathes. Sure, it's like a flame. It grows and it backs down, and sometimes it dissipates completely in certain areas, but it's never completely extinguished because people are always exchanging something for something else.
I mean, the Civil War is like a perfect example of one on time when it absolutely was killed, because you have people who were legally able to buy and purchase buy and sell other beings, like human beings.
Yeah, and make them
That
work.
economy is not alive right now. That
No.
economy is not the same.
No.
So like, that's where I like, yeah, everything's always on a continuum, but at the same time, if we're saying it's all connected, then there's never any point to disconnect it. So then it's all the same. So that's where it's like we have to like draw some sort of articulation point, or else it's all like we might as well be bartering in the same manner.
I think it's like a pond and it's raining, and that's what an economy looks like. And sometimes the water level rises and it grows, and sometimes it recedes, and occasionally some kid comes by and throws a big paver into the middle of it and it creates a wave, and then it washes something away, and then it comes back eventually, and then it stops raining at some point, and then winter dries it all up.
Was the Silk Road an economy?
Sometimes.
I don't think so. Like, the Silk Road was like...
It provided the framework for an economy to exist.
Exactly, but it
was an infrastructure.
I think
wasn't just an economic phenomenon. No,
I think an economy has to be tied to an actual nation to actually be an economy.
Okay.
And this is where the notion of like economic principles are not the same as an economy, whereas like, yeah, economic principles always exist in some form, but an economy in terms of like a gross domestic product, like you can't have a GDP if you don't have a nation. There's no
but you can have a local economy that's completely self-sustained if you have the right conditions.
But you have to have a local state then. If there's no entity,
well, yeah, they have to agree on some kind of common way of exchanging
then it's either
things.
a municipality or a state level identity that you're talking. Like even if it's localized, like a farmer's market is an economy, but that's because they've identified themselves as a unit at that point. A bunch of farmers in a group in like a geographical region are not an economy unless they have an established focal point of exchange, and it doesn't have to be necessarily like a building. It just has to be like a
place where the regional market forms.
Yeah, and it can be conceptual, and it doesn't have to be an actual physical building, but it can be like the concept of a cooperative or something.
Sure.
And it can exist, but until there's an agreement by a collective, there like I wouldn't say that there's an economy unless there's an actual articulated group. Like, and then once there's an articulated group, that's again like this is why.
But humans haven't really been able to exist as individuals until like the last 100 years, really, not even that, because there's still places where humans still have to band together and form really tightly knit communities in like developing nations. And
I don't even know if it's even possible.
I know it isn't.
Like
no one's. We're not self-sufficient because we can't survive in space on our own.
Nope. Well, once one person goes off on their own, they have no procreation possibility. So then
They have no
it's like,
agency beyond themselves.
yeah, and a society of individuals would die off in one generation.
Yeah.
So we can't be a society of individuals inherently, and that's kind of where there's this idea of the individual that is in certain societies that we romanticize that actually can't even exist. Like the person who lives in the woods on their own, completely self-sufficient, still has to go into society for something at some point.
Yeah.
Um, and even
I mean, even the skills he learned were learned from other people.
Yeah. No.
there you
We're
go.
not biologically evolved to where our parents leave us at birth. Cooperation is how we survive.
Yeah,
It's
it really is.
a defining character of our species.
Well, there's an old
Yeah.
saying: "No man is an island."
Yep. If you could drop a human into the woods, and we could split our own cells to make our own reproductive cycle, like some fucking snails or slugs, I believe. It's snails or slugs. Some snails and slugs can do this. If we could do that and not have to be trained on how to survive, then I could say we were individual species or a species that thrived on individuality, but we can't thrive on individuality. That said, the individual identity is the security like defense mechanism for the body, and that's what protects our body from danger. Like, oh, I'm about to fall off this cliff, I need to protect this body. It's like lemmings follow each other off the cliff. The individual will say, oh, that person just fell off a cliff, that's dangerous, so I'm going to protect my body by doing this alternate set of actions. But that doesn't mean that our thought process doesn't get influenced by other people constantly.
Yeah.
Like social learning is a complete style. It's a valid form of learning. Like you can learn from just watching people.
Imagine how complicated it would be going through life, disregarding any of the advice that people give you. That's like, don't do that. Okay, and you just burn your hand. I imagine that person wouldn't last very long.
Yeah, it's like perpetually being a teenager. But I guess that's the Fox News crowd, The Fox News crowd does not listen to shit except for Fox News.
I don't even think they fully listen to that either.
No, they don't.
They only hear the words to get repeated 3 or more times.
It's sad. I try to get my news from as many sources as possible, because every source is tainted with bias, and you never really get the full picture reading anything.
There's actually a really weird way of reverse engineering good content. And it's you find the things that Fox News is talking about, and you find the news articles that are not talking about the things that Fox News is talking about. Because Fox News essentially identifies the bullshit right off the bat.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to look at it.
If people are having difficulty finding a decent news source, that's one way.
If MSNBC and Fox News are talking about it, you should probably ignore it.
Yeah, seriously. MSNBC is the other. They like if Fox News paints it red, MSNBC paints it blue, and
Yep.
they both put a kind of a really dangerous spin on it. That if they were writing fiction, it would make more sense. But they're presenting this stuff as news. And it's these op-eds. Sometimes they're interesting because you see some pretty creative storytelling. But in a lot of ways, it's just like the Bible isn't an accurate representation of a historical timeline. We can't call it history.
No, definitely not.
It's a very good mechanism to deliver your ethics and your morals, and it's a really good way to explore complex situations. But really, it's a book. It was written by humans, and that's what we're getting a lot now with our modern media. We're getting a lot of we're getting a lot of storytelling, and it's really dangerous. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with you.
Exceptional Radio.
So that was a Tabale Tegi original, or remix.
God of War, Chains of Olympus soundtrack. And I actually got express permission from the guy that wrote the original music to do the remix, because I got to interview him. I interviewed him about his experience in the industry and asked him if it was okay to remix some of his stuff. And he gave me express permission and then gave me the files from like the original fucking master files to do the remix, which was like, that was one of the most epic things ever as a musician to have. You know, I think remixing is a whole genre. I mean, it's not a, you know, it's its own style, but when you ask the person of the shit that you're remixing to get their permission, and then they're like, yeah, go for it, I want to see, and then, you know, they're like, do whatever you want, I want to see your style in it. It was like a very fun,
well, you know, that's
exploration.
a very, very positive thing to hear, because so many times in in the music industry, or I read about the music industry, about people sampling something or taking something and trying to make something new with it and then getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, some people aren't able to release music because they're not able to reach a licensing agreement for a sample.
Wow.
And that's tragic.
Well,
There's so much music that can't be
at
released
the
for that very
same
reason.
time, I
You
wonder
can't
how many,
release it for commercial purposes. You can't sell it. You
right,
can give it
yeah.
away.
Yeah.
But I also wonder how many people do it without asking first, because
Yeah.
I asked him.
Settle it in court.
That's the whole, like, asking for permission or asking for forgiveness is easier than asking for permission
Asking for
culture.
Yeah,
No,
that's
it's
a
true.
very Western. It's true, but that's a very Western approach. In that, you know, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'd rather just ask for forgiveness and permission," not realizing that if you ask for permission, they might go way beyond what you were asking for permission for, and then you end up with like something beyond your fucking wildest dreams of like what you even thought you could begin to.
Oh,
Like,
sure. You end up with files
mean,
that
it's
are of
it's
higher quality. You end
it's
up with stuff
indicative
that's
of the
worth
general
working with.
just general phenomenon that the honor isn't that valued in Western culture.
right.
That's
Except
why you
for
ask
the-
for forgiveness, because nobody cares that you did them bogus. In some places, you cross somebody like that, you won't have a chance to ask for forgiveness.
No,
That's a
death
really
debt to be settled.
It's an incredibly strange dichotomy. A culture that doesn't value honor yet fetishizes Eastern concepts of honor.
Well, you can only fetishize it if you don't have it, right?
That's
Right.
true.
That's the only way you can do that.
Yep.
And I think that's, you know, I think that's a very astute sort of reason. Like, we can only have the samurai spaghetti western in a culture that values the cowboy individual, but also wants to romanticize this samurai that is honor above everything, knowing damn well that nobody acts like that over here.
Right.
Yeah, this is the shoot first, ask questions later culture.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a price culture, man.
Yep. But in that, you know, I think that's also why when you actually ask for permission first, because nobody does it, it catches people so off guard. They're like, well, holy shit, this person asked me for permission. Let's go fucking do something. So I'm trying to, man, that's not the first time I've done that, but there's been so many times where I've like reached out to people who you would think would be unapproachable, and they respond just because you reach out and approach them instead of asking, like, once you already violated their identity by you know, recontextualizing their words or whatever, or reusing their sound or whatever it is. But again, this is where, like, it's amazing how much more people are inclined to go further when you ask them for permission instead of forgiveness.
I totally agree with you, Chris. And the thing is, I think a lot of us think we're such pieces of shit on the inside that we can't possibly believe that somebody else is going to be nice to us, because
Right.
we're not nice to anybody. And that's the problem. And this sort of like slippery slope of, oh, it's just a white lie. Oh, I'm just going to do it this one time. Oh, I really need this $10, so I'm going to take it from my friend when he's not looking. You know what I mean? Just ask, man. And when you ask, be prepared to hear no. And if you can't hear no, then, you know, maybe you should reevaluate where you are in your life.
Yeah. And that gets back to, you know, people are afraid to ask for help. They would rather steal from somebody and try not to get caught than ask for help. And I think that's like, it's indicative of a society that's too focused on trying to pretend that people are self-made when we've already established you can't make yourself. You need somebody to make you first.
Yeah.
In this society, in this existence, until we can start cloning ourselves and fucking, you know, like I said, splitting ourselves at a cellular level. Nobody is fucking self-made. That word should not exist.
But do we really trust the average person enough to to understand the protocols necessary to not just sample their own DNA, but then to put it into a machine,
no.
and then without incurring the wrath of some kind of genetic disease that occurs over degradation of the samples because they didn't clean the thing right?
Why do they need to be fucking copying themselves anyway? If somebody is in the 50% of society is not adding to anything. Why do we need another fucking second person not adding to anything? And that's just like selfish, like, oh, I deserve to see a clone of myself because I can make a clone. Like, no, motherfucker, unless you're doing something of value, nobody needs a fucking clone of your wasteful ass. Just fucking waste
That's a
your
really
shit.
interesting thing.
Just waste your shit and waste it up and waste on. Just
Yeah.
waste on, but we don't need another clone waster.
I feel
don't
like
need
we're
a
gonna
clone
see
waster.
like organ body clones, like what were they called? A homunculus.
Oh yeah.
I think
Yeah,
we'll be able to we'll see that before people try to clone and pass consciousness is over. I think
A
we're
homunculus is more useful than somebody just wasting. At least a homunculus gives you some fucking organs that can be reused.
Yep.
Like-
Skin, organs, bones, nervous system, connective tissues, whatever. The nervous system itself. Get
I
transplanted.
mean,
all
technically,
that.
like the mice that they grow the ears on are homunculi.
Yeah.
Homunculi. So that shit already exists to a certain degree, but that mouse is definitely more useful and relevant than a lot of actual people.
That mouse's contribution to science is worth more than.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just this conversation sparked a story idea in my head, and I think it'd be a pretty cool, I don't know, video game, movie, series, or whatever, where you live in a world where you can choose to not do anything and be a bum, and you'll still have all the trappings and everything else that everybody else does, but you're not allowed to procreate.
So
only people that contribute are allowed to procreate.
So yesterday I was just surfing the internet, and I came upon this image, and it was like a tweet of sorts, where apparently in the 1800s it was fairly common for landowners and noblemen to have a hermit just living on their land, and they would supply this person with a skull and a book and some food, and basically give them a stipend and let them just live somewhere in the woods on their property. And this was
man, that's awesome.
This was a job that people had.
Let me see what kind of shit you come up with, guy. That's fucking awesome, dude. Not that I'm into feudal shit and all of that, but that's really fucking awesome.
That was a job. People, that was someone's livelihood. They walked around in a weird cloak, pretended to be pagan or druid or whatever, and carried a skull and a book around to go be a druid.
Awesome,
I mean, I don't think we're at that place where we can have that anymore. I don't think that exists anymore.
I feel like if Netflix was listening in on this shit, they just got like 2 new show ideas.
Netflix gets a lot of show ideas from us. They just don't give us credit.
That's awesome, dude. Hell yeah.
No, we throw a lot of ideas out to the internet, and
I mean, we pretty much predicted fucking Endgame, except we thought it was gonna be Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Like that used the time stone instead of just a straight up time travel
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that was 90% accurate.
Well, it took all of the Avengers to do what Doctor Strange could have done on his own. It wouldn't have been as interesting a movie if he'd have done it.
Yeah, which is why they had to wipe him out in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's overly powerful.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Marvel, I love their stories, man. Modern mythology is amazing. You know?
Dude, Marvel's so good about, what we had happen in front of us is we just had an epic created that is more epic than any epic before. And
it's safe for kids.
Right, and it was hard to see at first because it was unfolding. Now that the Infinity Saga is completely unfolded, it's impossible to say that this is not more epic than Odysseus or Troy or Ulysses, rather. Like, this story and the way it unfolded, it is quantifiably more epic than any epic that has come before it. And I think in that, like, so there's so many little details, like when you have like when they had that scene in Ragnarok where Loki's watching, he's pretending to be Odin, but he's watching a play of Loki and Thor. You're so distracted by Matt Damon that you might not even realize this fucking Luke Hemsworth playing Thor in the fucking play. Yeah. It is little shit like that where they do all these things in the movie. Because then, if you think about it, the fact that Matt Damon is playing Loki means that it's actually Matt Damon playing Loki.
Yeah.
Like in the Marvel universe, Loki knows who Matt Damon is and casts himself as Matt Damon.
Yep.
Like that's a joke on its own. But it's so layered within it that you have to think about like, oh my God, Loki wants Matt Damon to be him, and it's like not even the joke itself. It's just a joke layered within the joke.
Well, I think that's like that's the sprinkles.
Yeah,
that's the sprinkles
exactly.
on the icing and a little bit of syrup right there, and we take it for granted because we just expect the cupcake to have those things, but the reality is that the cupcake was good without them. We don't even notice that they're there.
Like if that scene wasn't in the movie, it'd still work.
Yep.
The fact that it's there when you're looking at it in the context of a 40 50 hour arc, that little character flourish gives you a real world experience that makes that world believable. Because again, it's like, what out of 50 plus hours of content, why even focus on this little thing? But it's because you need to understand this part of this character's psyche, even if you don't even really understand it at first, like what you're seeing, like you still get it subconsciously. But these are all the things about this epic.
So it's like 48 hours to watch all of it, end to end, from all of the MCU that's been released thus far. 48 hours.
Yep.
2 days nonstop. I like to marathon TV shows, and I haven't tried to marathon the entire MCU.
Dude, the 15-year-old me would have been all about that shit.
I mean,
any reason to stay up 48 straight, like hell yeah.
I mean, you start to get loopy at hour 36. So
yeah, dude.
You thought Lord of the Rings
after
was
24 is questionable.
I mean, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit together, still not 48 hours.
Yeah, it's like MCU's like, hold my beer.
And then we've got like what, phase 4, 5, and 6 coming up.
Already planned, so that's probably another 48
hours. We're gonna have fucking 96 hours of movies coming up.
And you think they're gonna stop there?
Hell
you know
no.
What I mean? Like,
no, those comics are gonna keep going.
That doesn't even count the TV shows.
Nope.
Because the TV shows are gonna be canon too, which
Yeah.
they're gonna be 13 hours a piece, or something like 7 to depending on how many episodes. It's like.
There's also the Avengers cartoons, which are like, I don't know how many seasons there are, but there's like 20-something, 28-minute episodes of those each season.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that stuff counts too.
Technically, S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Runaways are canon too.
Yeah, I like S.H.I.E.L.D.
They're just like very tangential.
Yeah.
Well,
I think S.H.I.E.L.D. is an interesting explanation for the back end of all the stuff that happens. Like, it's like, how the hell does all this stuff happen in one place all the time? And really, it's not just that it happens to happen. There's a very coordinated effort to make sure that all of those things happen, and they're so good that we don't see them.
And they use like a Secret War storyline for S.H.I.E.L.D. as well. So it's like it's a fun tangent that's still sort of canon.
Well, I think it'll be interesting once. I think at some point in Phase 4, once the Skrull Secret War really comes into full swing, they're gonna have to reveal that S.W.O.R.D. is an institution that has existed in tandem with S.H.I.E.L.D. and I don't think that people even are aware of S.W.O.R.D. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because they've already shown the Nova Corps.
Yeah. Nova Corps has been revealed. They've introduced the Kree on several dimensions of Kree.
Mm-hmm.
We know, they have to introduce the Earth Defense Force of S.W.O.R.D. It'll happen. If they don't, then they waste a really good opportunity to really provide some greater depth to their characters.
I'm fairly positive it's already been confirmed that it's like
Gonna happen.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'd be so mad if they didn't give us. I still think that they gave us the scroll, all of the scroll saga like section like out of sequence. But I realized that Captain Marvel takes place in the past, so
Yeah.
there's
Well,
still
shit.
time.
And you know what's funny is with what I think is happening with that Black Widow release, like
Because it takes place in the past too.
right, which also I don't think people are realizing, like Steve or Loki could go back and then pull her out of the past in the same way that Gamora got pulled out of the past. So like the fact that it's taking place in the past and they're moving it relative to the Eternals makes me think that somebody, like, we're gonna see one of her past stories,
Yeah.
but in the post credits we might see like Steve show up with the fucking you know, like the Soul Stone or some shit, and he's like, we got to go to Vormir or some shit, and that's how they do the post credit and bring back Black Widow, because I like nobody stays dead. It's not real. It's a fucking Marvel comic universe. So we're just trying to figure out how they're gonna bring back Black Widow and not if at this point.
Yeah, Black Widow is kind of like one of those cornerstone characters. She's integral to so many stories that you can't just start rewriting all of these stories without her.
Well, and then on top of that, people are speculating that her sister got facial reconstruction and replaced her at one point, but I don't know if that's necessarily. I don't think that necessarily makes sense, because then that negates her sacrifice.
Well, if they do that, then they introduce that whole secondary Hydra storyline,
right,
where,
which is also why they might do that.
and then they introduce her mother, Viper, Lady Viper, and that's actually a really cool storyline, because she can like control people with her venom, and
Yeah, which I think that may be.
that would be a
where they're going.
really good storyline, actually, because like the whole point of Black Widow confronting her mother is one of those, like, she was supposed to be part of some orphan girls academy where they train them to be assassins, but
Red Room.
but lo and behold, that she was like dropped off there by the fucking leader of Hydra. That's some serious shit.
Well, and it's like they could totally combine that, where that's the first part of the plot of the film, and then maybe she did switch faces, and we still end up seeing how she sacrificed herself and where the real Nat is. But there's all the different kind of ways that they could take it, but it seems like those two are the most likely sort of directions for that film, as to why it's placed right here, and why would they release a Black Widow film after they just killed the character off? It just makes no fucking sense.
To people's emotions,
Well,
obviously.
and not only that, like, I mean, but we saw Gamora got killed off for the Soul Stone, and now she's back.
Yeah,
So,
but all that takes place kind of in the past, from
right,
like,
but that's what
of
I'm
the
saying.
future of the past.
That's why this film being in the past
Also
of the
makes sense,
future
yeah.
makes sense as to how they're going to bring her back.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like, and I think that nobody's talking about that, to me, really makes it even more, because I feel like if that rumor were more abound, then Disney would have to, like, if that were the actual storyline, Disney would have to like quell it. But people aren't really talking about it, so it makes me think that the people Disney feeds information are being misdirected on purpose.
I think everyone's so wrapped up with The Mandalorian and This Is the Way, and I have spoken to think about MCU right now. Star Wars is in full swing. They've been pushing really hard. They released a new season of Clone Wars. People are watching Rebels over again because they forgot what happened in it. They want to try and tie all of those stories into the larger Disney Star Wars universe, because that's still happening.
And I thought they had filmed part of season 2 already for Mandalorian.
I think they already did. I think it's already done. They just have to finish.
I thought it was. Yeah, I thought it was like almost all done.
They're in the post-production phase, and and Disney's got such incomprehensible resources that they can just go and select a portion of land that they want to film on, spray it down from a low altitude, and spray it with something else, go in, vacuum all that crap up, and the place is clean. And then they establish their
Dude.
own perimeter. I mean, Disney is
They digitally insert people before they do all that, and we wouldn't even be able to tell the difference.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they've gotten so good at digital insertion that, you know, you look at the way Thanos and Hulk fight,
Yeah.
like at that point, it doesn't look like our brains are too dumb to tell that those things aren't
Well,
real.
in the big fight when it's Thor and the Captain America and Iron Man, there's a section of the fight where they're all three going at him, and he's such a masterful martial artist tactician that he can fend off Thor and Captain America and Iron Man. And between the three of those dudes, there are two fucking hammers, and he's able to fend them all off. Thanos is a bad motherfucker. Like,
But
he's
Scarlet
a
Witch is stronger than him.
yeah. I mean,
'Cause then
he's a bad. Well, the trick is, if
fucking-
you watch, he's able to counter the hammers by grabbing either Thor or the Captain by their
wrist.
arm. Yeah,
Yeah,
by the wrist.
So
I say
it-
the arm because his hand is so big, but
Yeah. Well, and what it is like they established power hierarchies, and then it was like only after Scarlet Witch had been able to sort of hone her power, did she finally become more powerful than Thanos? Because like in Infinity War, she was as powerful as him, but in Endgame, she was more powerful than him.
yeah,
And that's where it's like, because then what it was is like the fucking Stormbreaker is then officially more powerful than the Gauntlet in head-to-head combat, but the Gauntlet still has power. There's all these things that they establish power hierarchies, so you know,
yeah.
like oh, Hulk is equally as strong as Thanos, but Thanos is faster.
He's a better
and
martial artist.
Yeah, exactly. He's got better martial arts skill, and that's why he beat Hulk, not because like they're equally as strong.
You know, it's the same reason that Batman, when Batman and Superman go toe to toe, Batman can use Aikido, and you know, it makes it look like he's tossing Superman around like a rag because he's a ninja, and his Aikido is better than Clark's. But all Clark actually has to do is stop moving and be like, wait a second, I'm not doing this anymore. And then Batman's just kind of holding on to him and shaking. At a point, I mean, it wasn't Professor Hulk that went toe-to-toe with Thanos. It was regular Hulk. I think
Right.
Professor Hulk would have been apprehensive about physically engaging Thanos.
Professor Hulk would have been weaker
Yeah.
too.
He would have known that he would have had he would be going in at a serious disadvantage. So
Yeah, intellect bars you from tapping into that rage as well.
yeah.
Which is also like they set up the Hulk. There's so many things that happen with the way they made the Hulk go to Sakaar. It's not super obvious what happens. It's like when Natasha pushes Bruce into the thing and basically kills him, because whenever Bruce like falls off something, like he doesn't necessarily transform before he hits the ground. He like hits the ground and dies.
Yeah.
And then turns into Hulk. So Natasha basically killed him one time to turn him into the Hulk.
That's how he
why
knew in
That's why
Ragnarok.
they broke up. But that's why he like left to go to Sakaar, because she like Hulk made that decision because Natasha decided she needed Hulk more than Bruce, and in that moment, Bruce no longer wanted to be with Natasha, and then Hulk decided that Natasha was not worth coming back for, and that's when he ended up like off in Sakaar. So there's all these things about like they whittled down the Professor Hulk transition, but it's still there.
Well,
It's just
I
very
was,
hard to.
I was
pick
just
up on.
thinking, like, he knew jumping off of that ship and landing on the bridge in Ragnarok that it was going to kill him. I don't think he thought he was going to turn into the Hulk mid fall.
Exactly,
He knew
exactly.
he was gonna smack the ground,
Yep,
and
exactly right.
that it was going to take a little while.
And I think they showed us that because they had discussed it in the previous movies, but didn't show it to us before.
Yeah.
And then it was like comedic effect now, because you don't want to see this. Like, this is how you make suicide comedy. Like, we just saw Bruce Banner kill himself to turn into Hulk, but because it happened so fast, you don't actually grasp. Like, oh, this dude just offed himself in front of us, because that's what it was. when he discusses how like he tried to kill himself and he put a bullet in his mouth and the green guy spit it back out.
Yep.
That's how we know that like suicide is one of his ways that he can turn into the Hulk. And
Yeah.
that's how they set it up, because they don't show it to us. But then once they finally show it to us, we don't even realize it because we're like, oh, this is hilarious. He jumped out of a fucking thing and just didn't turn into Hulk yet. That's because he fucking had to commit suicide. But it's like, you don't want a kid to think that line of thought when they're watching this film.
Yeah. Is that Disney being careful? Should I be surprised?
I think Disney is very.
No debt or blood.
Yeah.
I think Disney is a very methodical organization. I don't think that they do anything without running, countless simulations in their world modeling environment at Epcot. I know that Epcot is this big place, but I'm sure that they have another variation of that big orb thing, and it's really like what we all imagined Cerebro to be, but it's real, and it's just a big ass supercomputer that runs simulations.
Right.
And that's how they figure out the next movie to make, and that's how they figure out which how to design the next Disney princess.
It's really sad that we're all so formulaic as a group. But I guess it's to be expected, right? How else could it be?
I mean, that's asking for everyone to be unique. I think that's terrifying. Imagine how chaotic the world would be if everyone was trying to be different from everyone else. At some point, we
wouldn't have a shared language.
Yeah.
If everybody had their own language, we wouldn't be able to communicate.
Yeah. There's no communication.
That's the extreme, like, example of individualism, where everybody has a language so unique that only they can speak it, then nobody can talk.
Yeah.
And it's like, there is a...
If you've never spoken to anybody, do you really have anything to say?
Yeah, that's like, there's the thought experiment of the extreme opposite end.
There a difference between art that comes out of a formula or art that comes out of a spontaneous moment?
I
Are
think
they fundamentally different?
I
or are
think
they both art?
I think the conservatory would describe art that comes out of study and observation to be part of the conservatory, and what is created through other means would be described as outsider art. Somebody who's not involved in the conservatory, who's not a part of that complex set of rules of reflection and examination and pursuit of technical excellence and all that kind of stuff. I think that there are plenty of outsiders who have made big waves and changed the way that people think, though. I think they still exist. They just have to find different ways of standing out.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely,
We've got enough population that it should be easy, but it's actually hard because of diminishing returns, and there's not only so much time in the day to listen to anything.
Right, and that ends up how people all are talking about the same thing, even though they felt like they stumbled upon that as individuals. Like, there's no reason everybody in America should be talking about the same media content when everybody's isolated. But because our choices are actually set up in a way that doesn't actually give us free will as we believe it to be, then we as individuals can't actually practice individualism in the way we believe it to be, because our choices are so limited, but our perspective is limited on those choices. So we still get the false sense of like a unique identity, when really everybody's just basically picking their identity from the choices they're given. It's like, oh, are you a hippie? Are you a hipster? Are you into hip hop? And one of those, you're gonna be one of those things, or you might define yourself as all of them. You're gonna be
hip hop hipster, bro.
Now you're a Wook.
Well, I remember when Ewoks and Wookiees, the the description first started emerging at raves, but
Mm-hmm. But again, it's like this notion of because that person felt like they were trying to be an individual, being like, well, I like hip hop, but I'm also a hippie and I'm also a hipster. There's so many of those people that then that became a thing. And it's like this notion of like, if you feel like you're trying to make choices to be an individual and you end up just categorizing yourself as something else. And it's like impossible. Like, oh, you fucking cut your own firewood and have eggs and your own chickens. You're a prepper. You're a doomsday prepper.
but these aren't these titles applied by the Observer at this point?
I mean, that's true, but the titles can only exist when the traits accumulate.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, if I want to live off the grid,
So without
Like-
so without an anthropologist, that person might exist entirely without having any kind of classification at all.
yeah,
Somebody
I
has to
mean,
perform classification by observing them, and
Yeah,
oh wow, this is one of those like seeing the forest for the trees type of scenarios, isn't it?
yep.
Mm.
Because then this is the same thing as to why there's not actually a Hindu religion, but it's because you have outside observers trying to impose a paradigm onto something that doesn't actually have that paradigm. You have a Hindu religion that has thousands of different gods and thousands of different ways of worship.
Yeah, like
Because it's not the same thing.
because the person that worships Kali is not the person that worships someone else.
Ganesh,
Vishnu
he's
or
always my
Ganesh.
favorite, man.
Yeah, Ganesh. Yeah, the person who worships Kali might not be the person that worships Ganesh, but we still call them both Hindu.
Yeah.
Well, they have patron gods in their families, like we have patron saints in Orthodoxy.
Some of them do, but again, it's like
Yeah, some. I mean, it's
Some-
such a large group that yeah, they really do it.
again,
all
it's
their own
like
way.
when you're talking about the patron gods of Hinduism, that's like a white construct.
Yeah.
Because the only reason it's a white construct is because that's the only way white people can understand religious practice. It's like, oh, who's your patron saint? Who's the leader of your church? Oh, Gandhi's your leader. Like, oh, your Siddhartha is your saint, your main saint. Like, and the only way they can fathom it is through a Western lens.
You know,
and that's not always like accurately portraying.
I've always appreciated that the Chinese kind of have a lack of a creation story. Like the universe just kind of exists already, and humans appear because the Jade Emperor wills it for the most part. It's a lot easier to stomach than like 7 days. Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
You know,
yeah, I don't know. Like a lot of these different creation stories and creation myths are like,
they have such strange rules.
well, some of them are very geographically relevant
That makes
to
sense.
the connotation of what the stories mean. So if you're trying to understand a creation story without understanding the geography of where that creation story came from, then you might be already unable to understand like why this culture has this creation myth, and then establish something that is completely nonsensical to try to rationalize because you don't have that information about their geography.
Yeah.
And this is like, you find out a lot of like Egyptologists never learn the languages of the regions they're studying. So it's like, how are you understanding what these cultures are talking about if you don't know their languages? But it's acceptable because if you frame it through the Western lens, then the Western lens allows a visceral assessment that can then say, oh, there's all these common uses of symbols and culture. So then even though we don't understand language, we can say that this is like what it most likely means, even though we don't understand their language at all. And then you get all these, like, there's a lot of discussion of cannibalism and sacrifice in Southern cultures, but I wonder how much of that is like the West misinterpreting colonial like retaliation, where say like imperialists tried to go into somewhere in South America, and then the South Americans like skin them and fucking do some shit with their skulls. Then you find it 100, 200 years later, and you're like, oh, this is a ritual when may have been in retaliation for acts of war or something. And it's like, because they don't know the language, they're not going to know the full context. And they're like, oh, this is a ritual, when maybe it was because they got attacked and they wanted the fucking attackers not to ever come back. So they started putting skulls at the edge of the fucking cities. And it's not, they didn't just do that shit all the time. Like, so I have a hard time, like,
Are we sure then that
time accepting imperialist frameworks?
Are we sure then that like the sacrifices by the indigenous South American cultures was really sun worshipping, or were they killing their enemies?
Exactly, we don't. And in many cases, yeah, maybe it was sun worship, and maybe they were sacrificing, but I'm not going to accept that paradigm from a culture that's trying to make them out to be barbaric and uncivilized.
Yeah.
And those things be the reason
when they were able to perform like brain surgeries.
Right, exactly right. And that's kind of where there's all these or they had like running aqueducts and like sanitary like sewage systems and shit like that, where you're like,
I'm just gonna go with they were able to perform brain surgery. That's like, I think to get to the point of being able to perform brain surgery, you got to have some serious hygiene awareness, like cleanliness awareness.
To successfully do it, no doubt.
And you'd have to have some kind of solution to sanitize tools.
Man, I doubt aliens taught people how to wash their hands.
God, I mean, imagine.
Depends on who you ask, man. Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, an alien species traversed thousands and thousands of light years to teach us how to wash our hands. That's exactly what happened. That's so rational.
You know, speaking of weird aliens traveling light years and light years, I've been watching Star Trek Enterprise. I finally broke down and started watching Star Trek Enterprise because it was just, I ran out of stuff to watch. And I finally figured, you know what, I haven't watched it. I couldn't get past the theme song for so long, but why not, right? And
let's go back to Voyager.
Yeah, well, so I'm in the first season, and there's this episode where Scott Bakula, who's the captain, runs into the bad guy who's played by Dean Stockwell, and he walks into the room, and there's Dean Stockwell holding this rectangular thing, and for a brief moment, I think to myself, are they gonna make us? Are we gonna see them do what was it, Quantum Leap? Is this a Quantum Leap moment? Because if they're doing Quantum Leap, I'm into that. I watched that show when I was real little with my mom all the time, so it was really surreal to see him and Dean Stockwell on the same screen. But I think that's all we've got for tonight. We will catch you next week. I called it a show. Yeah. No, I ended on that story about Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.